Hi and welcome to Stories and Stuff. Today I'm going to go through how you can teach children to summarise, which is a really important skill we need in reading. And to do this, to start off with, I'm going to be using my version of Little Red Riding Hood. Now, we summarise all the time. If you take, for example, when you get home from work or children get home from school and you talk about what you've done that day, you don't go through every little thing you've done. So I don't say to my family, well, I got out of my car and I walked across the playground and I let myself in through the gate and then I walked through the school and went up the ramp into my classroom. And there are two reasons why we don't do that. First of all, it would take nearly as long to say it as it did to actually do it, so all day. And also it's really boring, nobody needs to know that stuff. So we summarise all the time anyway, and summarising is where you pick out the main points to give people the main ideas so they can understand what's happened. I'll give you an example with one of the pages from Little Red Riding Hood now. Once upon a time, in a cottage on the edge of the woods, lived a little girl and her parents. She had a name, but everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood on account of the red hooded cape her grandmother had made her, and which she always wore. One morning, Little Red's mother called her into the kitchen. "Your dear Granny is sick," Mother explained, "and I need you to take her some things to make her feel better." Now, if you pick out the main points of information, the first is that there's this character called Little Red Riding Hood and she's pretty key to the story. And then the second is that Granny's sick and she has to go and visit her. You don't need to necessarily know that she lives in a cottage with her family on the edge of the woods. Those are all small details. The kind of crux, the main events or the main ideas are about her name and she has to go on this journey to Granny's house. Let's have a go with another page from the book. Little Red shrugged to herself. There was no one watching and Mother would never know. She stepped off the well-worn path and wandered among the trees. It grew darker as the forest became more dense. She shivered and pulled her hood up over her head. Suddenly there was a movement beside her. There was a flash of grey and there before her was a wolf. His eyes flashed yellow and he smiled, revealing canines as sharp as knives. So the main points of that page are she has broken her promise to Mum, or she's not followed instructions by leaving the path, and then she's bumped into this wolf. So those are the main ideas. Children can find it quite tricky to pick out the key ideas. They're not sure which details are important and which aren't. So lots and lots of practice of this is great, and it might be that the grown-up needs to do lots of modelling for them. You might take it in turns to read a page and then you summarise it and then they have a go. And don't be scared to challenge and say, is that really an important thing that you really need to know? A good way to practice it would be to say, right, we're going to have a read of this book now, and then when we see Dad or another family member, you're going to tell them what's happened in this page so far. The key is they're not going to reread the page to them, they're just going to summarise, they're going to pick out those main bits. Another good way to help children start to summarise is by playing some games. And to start with, I would do this a page at a time rather than a whole text. One of the things you can do is play a true or false game. And this is really asking children to reflect on what they've just read, and it helps them kind of pick out the main events. If you take the page we've just read, you might say, Little Red followed her mum's instructions, true or false, and they've got to recall what's happened and pick out that information. And what's fun is to take it in turns, so they have to pose a question to you. So you could do that one and then they might pose back, she bumped into a dragon, true or false. And it's getting that recall and thinking about the main parts of the story. And it also makes it a bit more fun for children when they're quizzing you as well. Of course, you don't have to practice summarising with books, you can do it with anything really. You could watch a cartoon, pause it and say, right, what's happened so far? You just want them to give you the main events and the most important things that have happened. And then once children are quite secure in summarising a page at a time, you can start to think about whole texts, and this is a bit more tricky. So here are some tips. One of the things that I like to do is, as a child is reading a story, I start to jot down some of the events. So if you take, for example, Little Red Riding Hood, I might write, Little Red Riding Hood's granny was ill. And then I might say, Little Red wandered off the path. And then a bit later on, Little Red arrived at Granny's house. Now what I will do as I'm writing these, I won't write them in the order that they happened in the book. And the task at the end then is to number those in the order that they happened. Once they were able to do it with 3 statements, you could increase it to 5. I probably wouldn't go any further than that. Children can find it quite easy to identify the first and the last, and then it's those bits in between that can be quite hard to sort. And of course they can write 5 things that happen in the story and ask you to order them as well. And then another way of summarising a text would be to pick out the overall meaning of the story. This is something that I think children find quite tricky. So if you say to the child, what did Little Red Riding Hood learn at the end of the story? They might tell you a bit about wolves and not picking flowers when a wolf tells you to. And actually the main story is to follow your mum's instructions and stay safe. And that can all come out in discussions around a book. So that's a few ideas about how to help children learn to summarise. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more ideas about supporting reading coming soon.